SignUpAutism.com. What's up, Penny?
All the things, Seth, all the things. Excited about TIFOS.
Right on. Yeah, we're here at TIFOS. That's right. The Executive Function Online Summit, executivefunctionsummit.com. It's live right now. It is Sunday, August 11th. Parents, dive in. It's free. Sign up, executivefunctionsummit.com. Tell your friends. We'll be live until tomorrow night, but today is group 3 of the speakers. So, Penny, as we're entering the school year and you're working with families, what are you hearing as some of the biggest things that parents are struggling with in terms of getting their kids prepped for starting the school year? Is there anything that's gone on in the last week or so with any of the families that's notable?
Yeah, there's just a lot of anxiety. And I think that there is as much, if not more, anxiety for the parents than the kids or teens, because we worry so much about what it is going to be like for them. Are people going to understand them? Are they going to accommodate properly? How much is executive functioning and other, other things going on for neurodivergent kids? How much is that going to get in their way? And for families like mine, there was a lot of history of it's really going to get in the way and people really aren't going to get it and it's going to be hard. And
People
so,
aren't going to get it, meaning like the teachers or people
yeah,
in
like
school
the
aren't going to get it.
teachers, especially 2E kids, I find, and I talk to a lot of parents of 2E kids, and we have this sort of false narrative that intelligence equates capability. And so when you talk to a really smart kid who may be really verbally fluent, you automatically assume a lot of times that they're capable, they're highly capable, right? And then they have these things that are getting in their way, like ADHD, autism, anxiety, dysgraphia, dyslexia, executive function, all of these things that can cause bumps in the road and hurdles in their path. And just to make it really hard for them to show what they're learning in the ways that they're expected to.
And show their
Um,
effort.
right, right,
Like their
right.
effort sometimes isn't noticed because it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a visible thing or there's not necessarily a product that shows their effort. And
Right.
I think also along the lines of what you're saying, sorry to interrupt, but this that especially with 2E kids, so we talk about asynchrony and we talk about neurodiversity, but with 2E kids, imagine that there's all these metrics on like an EQ of a stereo and they're
Mm-hmm.
all over the place. So let's think of
Yep.
those metrics as like different developmentally developmental benchmarks that are typical. These are atypical, right?
Right.
And so then you have a situation. I hear doggo. Hi, doggo.
They're
Then you have
going
a
wild, of
situation
course, right now.
where sometimes strengths outshine weaknesses, and then what you just said, those weakness there's the false assumption that they
Mm-hmm.
should be able to do this, and then there's the
Mm-hmm.
other where weaknesses can hide strengths, and there are strengths that are not noticed because there's too much focus on the quote weaknesses,
Yep.
so to speak,
Yeah.
and then we're not equipped to know how to really see an individual's needs, then these kids get lost in the shuffle, fall through the cracks, don't get their needs met,
Mm-hmm.
learn to resent school,
Mm-hmm.
feel
Mm-hmm.
bad about themselves. It's just not what we're trying to do.
Right, right. It's not. And, as much as you can advocate and all those things, it doesn't always work out well. My kid, like my own kid, I advocated like crazy. I knew what I was doing, right? And still, this kid with a super high IQ graduated from high school thinking that he was stupid and lazy. And that's all he would say. And it took us a long time to undo that false narrative that he had learned by trying to fit in a system that wasn't designed for him. Right. And so he couldn't, as you were saying, he couldn't show all that effort because people were expecting effort to look one way.
Mhm.
The other thing that I think parents are really struggling with right now as we talk about back to school is just those processes of preparation that we do at home or that we do to just keep day to day running, like getting more ready in the mornings. That is one that is just always, I don't think I've ever talked to a parent who didn't have a problem with getting ready in the morning and getting out the door, right? And so executive function is what we find that gets in the way a lot of the time, if you have a kid with school avoidance, then, it might be anxiety, but it might be anxiety from executive function struggles that are causing problems at school. So they don't want to be there because people don't get them. They don't understand. They're not seen. They don't feel heard and valued, right? And so they start to try to withdraw. But there's so much that we can do. And this is just one piece of this, is what I talked about in my workshop with you and TFOS, is like making things very structured and routine and very visual, and really getting simple, letting go of all that extra stuff and breaking it down into as tiny and simple pieces as we can. Because when we're anxious as the adult, we're just escalating our kids' anxiety. When we're stressed, we're escalating their stress. And so that's when the yelling happens, the blow ups happen, and everybody, walks out the door mad and 20 minutes late. I even hit my husband's car in my driveway on a very stressful morning, because normally he's not there, but his boss had changed the schedule. And on a Friday, his car was in the driveway. And I just went backing out, arguing with my kid and stressed out, and just slammed right into it. So, like, it's a real thing, it's a real struggle. And we have to figure out how to help our kids do well, because they want to. They don't want to leave the house feeling all anxious and stressed out and like mom or dad's mad at them. They want to have a good start to the day too. We have to provide that opportunity for them when it just doesn't come instinctual.
In the comments, Kat says, love, love, love all the visual cue ideas in your presentation.
Thank you.
Like magnet slap bracelet. What a great idea. And flip chart, super cool ideas. Let's talk specifically about just that one thing, because I think the ideas are applicable to other things, but just about the morning routine, getting out the door in the morning, because everybody can relate to that regardless of the age of their kid.
Yeah.
So with what Kat's saying here, do you have any other cool ideas? She says super cool
Yeah.
ideas.
One thing that I really learned over time in my own house was like, don't turn on all the lights. Don't turn on a bunch of noisy things. Like, my kid needed to have this smooth transition. He didn't need to go from darkness and sleep to all the lights on and all the
Sensorially.
sounds. And yeah,
Interesting.
it just, it automatically got him dysregulated. And so if you're starting dysregulated, nothing's going to go well. None of it. It just can't happen, right? And so thinking about, what does your kid need to stay more regulated? In that visual that I put together for that session, I had on there to build in a regulation activity. The one I used in the example was to splash water on your face, because we know scientifically that that activates the vagus nerve and calms down the system and can wake you up in the morning, right? It's that thing that can like just sort of refresh you. But it could be anything. If your kid doesn't like water on their face, it could be an ice pack. I've had tons of clients who have younger kids, like 6, 7, 8, even 5, and they'll get an ice pack with like their favorite character or animal on it, and they'll put it in the freezer together and say, like, this is my calm down pack, or whatever they want to call it. And kids will automatically start going and getting it, and they'll put it on their cheeks or their neck, and it will regulate the nervous system. But it could be blowing bubbles, it could be jumping on a trampoline, it could be so many different things for different individuals. But finding something that your kid likes and is regulating before you jump into a heavy executive function process is going to help. Because when we're regulated, then
And
all the
just
parts of our
to
brain are in
connect the dots,
harmony.
getting out the door is a heavy executive function process for a lot of
Yes.
kids. So
Yes.
keep going. Sorry
Oh my
to.
gosh, there's a million things to do, right? And we take
Mhm.
it for granted how many parts there really are to it. But yeah, so when they're regulated, not only is their thinking brain online, but it's in harmony with their emotional brain, their survival brain, right? And so kind of everything's firing on all cylinders, and then things are doable. But if our kids are dysregulated, their thinking brain is dimmed or inaccessible. How are they going to do all those processes and get out the door? They're not, right? It just doesn't, it's not doable at that point. Like, we have to start thinking about the nervous system's role in what I call doability, you know? Like, things just aren't doable if you don't have the skills and you're dysregulated and your emotional brain, your survival brain have taken over. Like you just can't. None of us can. Not just neurodivergent kids or kids with executive functioning deficits. And so we really have to start thinking about how do I prep my kid's body, my kid's brain, my kid's environment so that they can be successful with this process of getting out the door in the morning or going to bed at night or starting on homework, right? All of those processes, if we come into them kind of functioning our best with the best environment, then there's a lot more ability to get things done.
So what about this? And again, these things can be applied to different ages and they can be applied to different situations. Here we're talking about like getting out the door in the morning, but I'm going to talk about getting out the door in the morning, and whatever Penny's going to say is going to really be about transitions.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to talk about is preparation. Kids are often unprepared for class. They don't have the
Yeah.
materials they need. They went to their locker, but they still forgot the thing, or they have their backpack, but it still doesn't have what they need, or they were supposed to drop something off of the office, but the whole day went by and they thought about it a million times, but they didn't actually do it at a time they were thinking about it or whatever. So transitioning from home to school, whether that's by bus, walking, by car, whatever, transitioning from home to school requires being prepared, like noticing the details of the things that you're going to need, and that's really hard to do in the morning. Uh,
Hmm.
so what kinds of things do you do or recommend or teach that help with preparation, whether it's getting from class to class or getting out the door in the morning? But that term preparation has everything to do with executive function and
Yep.
details, which is really hard for us, people like me with executive function challenges.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you one of the things that I do, like I have something called a pocket box. I'll tell you about that. It's like a launching pad, landing pad. But what do you
Nice.
talk about?
Doing everything you can before the day before. Don't leave everything for the morning. I don't function well in the morning. I'm not a morning person. So even for me with good executive functioning, I'm going to forget something. Something is not going to go right. I'm not going to be fully prepared if I leave it all for the morning. So, not only like packing your kids' lunch, pack their backpack, put their shoes and socks next to the door, lay out their clothes the night before. You can even put the toothpaste on their toothbrush the night before, pour the mouthwash. Like, think about how much can you do the night before. I've known a lot of people who actually had their kids get dressed for school the next day before they went to bed. They slept in their clothes, they got up and they went out the door, and it worked for them. And it's been multiple families that I've known that have done that with success. And so that eliminates a whole complicated process for your kid of taking off their pajamas. Where do their pajamas go? Putting on their clothes, getting them right, front side to the front, right side out, all of that good stuff. That's all executive function process. If you can move it to a time that isn't in the morning when things are already stressful and time constraint, then that can be really helpful, right? You're eliminating, you're prepping ahead. As far as like prep at school and getting to class, it is such a hard thing to do. We ended up, my son did not use his locker,
I hear that
and
so much from kids with
yeah,
executive function challenges. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
that's such
did
a thing
not use
because
his locker.
it's not worth the pain for
Mm-mm,
them to know that they're going
mm-mm.
to keep getting in trouble by the teacher for not. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for
for those
being
of you that
late
are
or
like, "Oh my gosh,
whatever.
that's me too," that is
Yeah.
so common. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And for some kids, it doesn't feel safe. So, yes,
Mm.
like it takes time and you have to remember your combination. You have to do it under this like 4 minute stressful time period, which doesn't seem like doable for anyone. And you've got lockers coming out by your head. Like, you just didn't even feel safe to try to get in there and get things done. So, there's lots of reasons, I think, but I think more and more kids, especially now with not having so many textbooks, like when you and I were in school, there was no way I could carry everything that I had in my locker all day. I had a giant textbook for every class. But now it's different, and I think it's easier for kids. The other thing is that we went paperless, which was before kids were using computers, like before they all had computers. But because managing paper and getting things turned in and getting things home was such an enormous struggle, we went paperless and he used an iPad for everything. He took pictures of his worksheets, he completed them on the iPad, he emailed it to the teacher, and it was done. So he didn't have to make sure he was prepared to go to class. He didn't have to remember to turn something in. Teachers didn't have to remember to remind him necessarily sometimes, but it was a lot easier when it was like, okay, I finished the last problem, and you click the button to email it, right? Then putting it in your backpack, going to school the next day, 3 classes in, trying to remember to get that paper out and turn it in. Like he could do that process while he was already in the thick of doing that work. And that really, really helped. So it's not taking care of that executive function struggle. It wasn't really teaching that skill, but it was teaching him processes that he can use as an adult to get
Right. It gives you the
around that
workaround. It gives you a
struggle.
system.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I know, I recognize that it's not actually building that skill, but it was finding a way that was doable for my kid, and it worked. It didn't magically resolve everything. Don't get me wrong. He still didn't like school and he didn't want to do things and all that good stuff. But like it was
It's
night and
one thing.
day
It's one little
improvement.
win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And baby steps are everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then like, one thing that we did for that morning and preparation was my kids didn't mind having the same thing every day for breakfast. And so they would do it for a week or two and then they would choose something different. And so we didn't have to talk about what was for breakfast, except, that weekend that we were getting ready to change again because they were bored. I knew every morning for a week or two what they wanted, and I just got down there and I did it. So there weren't decisions to make, there wasn't discussion to have around it, there wasn't anybody changing their mind and frustrating me halfway through, right? Like it eliminated a lot of things.
Mm.
But you could also have your child choose the night before what they wanted for breakfast, so that you have that already done. And you don't have to do that in the morning. You're doing it the day before when maybe they're just more capable of figuring things out and being able to do that process without all that added time constraint pressure.
Did you ever hear about how Steve Jobs picked his wardrobe?
Mm-mm.
All he
But
wore, if
if
you
y'all
look at
only wore the same
any
thing, yeah,
pictures of him, it's just a
yeah, that
black
black
shirt,
turtleneck.
blue jeans, tennis shoes.
Yep,
There's
yep.
no in so supposedly he didn't want to waste time having to
Mm.
choose what to wear. So
And it
I love it.
worked.
But there's so many
Yeah,
ways to like do things like that, like what you just said with the meals and stuff.
yeah,
So and
yeah.
it's all about like these it's like stacking little tiny small wins together and it makes big change. So all right, well let's wrap up here,
Mm-hmm.
Penny. I'm Seth Perler. We have a thing called ExecutiveFunctionSummit.com. It's going on right now. Sunday's our third day with our third group of speakers, and tomorrow we have all the speakers. If you're not registered, jump in right now. And if you are registered, share the link with somebody. And Penny's one of our awesome speakers, and thanks for all the good you do in the world, Penny. I have so much respect for
Thank
you.
you, Seth. You are crushing it for executive function, I have to say. Changing lives. People don't know about it,
We all are. We
We had teachers in high school, special ed teachers who had never heard of it in decades of
at the
teaching.
end of my
So
teaching career, I
this is
had
what we
never heard
need.
of it. I just started hearing about it, and I was like, "What?"
That makes a lot of
All my
sense.
students that struggle this I start connecting the dots like all my students that struggle have executive function challenges in one way or another. Like that's the root. Now it can be because of different reasons, but like that's the umbrella. And it was like that lens just opens up so many more possibilities of like how to support kids. But all right,
Yeah.
thanks
Thanks for
y'all for
being
being
awesome,
here.
Seth.
Thanks for being an awesome
Appreciate
Penny
you.
in what you do in the world. All right, parents, be well. Take care.
Thank
See you,
you.
Penny. Actually,
Bye.
Penny, you can hang out for a minute.
Okay.
I'm on